The Bible tells us that in the last days there will be signs, not only here on earth, but also in the heavens above. In fact, Jesus said in Luke 21:25 that there will be signs in the sun and the moon and the stars. So what did Jesus mean? Well, my name is Pastor Brad Reaves, and this is the Coming Soon Ministries podcast, where we are looking at today's events and things that are happening all around us through the truth of Scripture and understanding what's happening with the lens of Scripture so that we can live better and live more certainly in these days that are growing in uncertainty. From Genesis to Revelation, God has used the heavens as a witness. In fact, Psalm 19 tells us that the heaven declares the glory of God. And that's been happening since God spoke them into existence. And so now we're living in a time when astronomical events seem to be getting more attention than ever, from solar flares to eclipses to unusual objects and rare cosmic phenomena. But for believers, the goal isn't just mere fascination, and it certainly isn't fear. It's discernment. And that's why I'm really thankful for today's conversation. Before I bring today's guests on, I want to remind you to please like and subscribe to our channel here on Coming Soon Ministries, and please check out our Substack page at comingsoonministries.substack.com. Also, on August 1st of this year, in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, we have a one-day event, an incredible assembly of speakers for a conference called Abraham to Armageddon, where we are going to discuss and discern the events of the world in a clear, prophetic, and scriptural lens. I want to invite you to please come and join us in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, or if you're unable to do that, we do have it live streamed as well, so you can enjoy it from wherever you're at. Now, I want to introduce to you Mondo Gonzales. Mondo is a part of Prophecy Watchers, and he also has the Psalm 19 project. Mondo is no stranger to heavenly events. He watches and records things that are happening in the heavenlies to give glory to God, first of all, but also help us understand what's going on around us more clearly. So with that, let's bring Mondo on. Well, Mondo, good to see you. Welcome to the program.
It is always good to be with you.
Hey, how's it going? I want to just give a quick update for people who are watching, and maybe there's somebody out there that doesn't know who you are. Would you introduce yourself, please?
Absolutely. My name is Mondo Gonzales. I was a pastor for 16 years, and then about 5 years ago, was asked to come over here to Prophecy Watchers, which Prophecy Watchers, many people might know, is a very large ministry, television and radio and YouTube, social media, you name it, print magazine. And so conferences, some of the biggest conferences of the year often come through Prophecy Watchers. So I felt honored to come here and join Gary Stearman and to help him co-host our television program. And he's going to be 88 this year, so he's slowing down a little bit, as he deserves to. And he's in here when he wants to be, and we give him the freedom to, what do you want to do, Gary? So it's pretty amazing to join him, and certainly all that he has done. So it's been good so far. We're very busy, as you know. You've been here now to the studios, which is great. So it's been a good time meeting everybody.
Well, I have such a deep respect for the work that Prophecy Watchers does, and have always enjoyed partnering with you guys in any way we can. And I encourage people, if they're not familiar with Prophecy Watchers, which I would be very surprised that if someone's watching this program, they're not familiar with Prophecy Watchers, please check them out. And I have a lot of respect for you, Mondo, because you have a very analytical mind with a strong and deep theological understanding of things. And one of your great, I don't know if you would call it a hobby or I don't know how you define it, is your love for astronomy.
Absolutely. I remember being, I think I was in 8th grade, and I thought I want to be an astronaut. Of course, you get a lot of dreams when you're young. And then I actually went to the fair. Let me turn my phone off. Sorry about that. I went to the fair, the county fair, the state fair, and I realized I get horrible motion sickness. So there went all of my dreams of being an astronaut. And anyways, so I've loved astronomy back many years ago, back in the late 90s. I owned a lot of telescopes and stuff, and have just always been in love with the heavens. And then recently, my kids got I became an empty nester, and I think I was 46, 47. I thought, you know what? I'm going to get a telescope again because I want to start taking photographs of the heavens because the technology is so far advanced now, and it makes it very easy for the new person. And so I came here, and Gary loves astronomy as well, and so we're kind of talking to him, and he's like, "Yeah, let's do it." And then, of course, we were able to, through many people that joined on, God was just very, very generous to us in allowing people outside of the ministry to say, "Hey, we want to support what you're doing." So we have an extremely well equipped observatory. And so we take pictures of the heavens. People can go to psalm19project.com and they can see all of our pictures. They're all free, high resolution, beautiful, beautiful stuff that God has created. And right now we're just getting ready, just for the sake of update, we're getting ready to move some of our best equipment to a remote site in New Mexico, where we're going to take advantage of the dark skies. That's one of the things bad here about Oklahoma is the skies are okay. So even the pictures that we get are okay, which we know they could be even better. But we're going to go to this place, and it's up 7,500 feet, which is great elevation. Skies are crisp and clear. The seeing is phenomenal. And so I would say expect some even better stuff from our project. But which again, I find it interesting that the Lord has allowed me to have this desire for so long, because here we are, Brad, and the scripture is very clear that there's going to be a lot of things happening in the skies, as we know, as we approach the end.
Well, Mondo, I've been able to see some of your work, and I think recently over dinner, you were showing me some of your pictures that you have on your phone, and they trump a lot of stuff what I see on NASA sites and stuff. I mean, it's very well done, and I know you put a lot of work into it, and you put a lot of passion into it, and it comes out. So this conversation we're having today is really timely, as we are seeing more things happen in the heavenlies. And there's a line between hope and hype. Jesus gave us these heavenly events, not for us to get hyped up about it, but for us to pay attention. What do you think about some of that?
Oh, 100%. If people know me, sometimes I get criticized that, which I'm okay with, that I tend to be kind of a naysayer. People say, "Oh, I always reject everything." It's like, well, no, as you mentioned, my mind is very analytical, and I'm not prone to sensationalism. And so I don't like that, because as we know, if you've been in the prophecy world long enough, there are those that have hurt the cause and the cause of Christ ultimately, because when you have people, in 1994 or 1988, 88 reasons why Jesus would come back in 88, and then Harold Camping in 94, and then you have all these other people in 2011, and so all these kind of predictions, which we'll talk about, the blood moons or the eclipse. Unfortunately, it brings up a good topic, which we're discussing, but when you have date setting and other things that come along with it, and the hype and the sensationalism, then when it comes and leaves, people are looking back and going, "Yeah, you're the boy who cried wolf." And so I have family members who would challenge me through the years about 2011, in May of 2011, the rapture's coming, the end of the world. And then I've said, well, I've never accepted that. I've never embraced that. Or the blood moons. Oh, the blood moons, what's going to come at the end of the world? And then these things come and go. And then the family members look at me, and I was like, well, you notice I wasn't a part of that. And so I see it provides opportunity when it's not done carefully. It provides opportunity for scoffing and mocking and hurting, again, ultimately true biblical prophecy, which is accurate. And as we'll discuss, but it just has to be taken with wisdom, I would say. And that's our goal. I mean, none of us, we pray for wisdom and discernment for sure, that as we share these things, we can be humble and read the text, teach the text accurately, but yet not get sucked into some of the hype.
In biblical prophecy, one of the voices of the signs in the heavens was Jesus himself. And in Luke 21:25, he said there would be signs in sun, moon, and stars. What exactly was he referring to? Was he pointing to a specific event, or was he wanting us to just pay attention and stay awake?
Well, I think the answer is yes to both of those, that the reason that Jesus spent the time in the Olivet Discourse in giving such a descriptive response to the disciples' questions. Jesus had just mentioned that the Jerusalem temple would be destroyed, and they're like, "What?" I mean, it shocked their world. They were not anticipating the heart of Israel, the temple, the heart of Jerusalem, to be destroyed. That didn't fit their eschatology, because the kingdom was coming. And so when Jesus responded to those questions, he expanded and said, "Let me tell you what's really going to happen." And of course, the distance of time between even the destruction of the temple in 70 AD all the way to where we're at now. But one of the things that he describes there was, he describes the whole events leading up to what we call the tribulation period, the 7-year tribulation, the time of God's wrath, which we see ultimately in Revelation 6:1 all the way through chapter 19. And if you read what he describes in the Olivet Discourse, Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21, it parallels very, very nicely with what you see in Revelation 6 and on. And one of those things is the sun and the moon and the stars, the heavens being shaken. And so when you look at the various implications in the book of Revelation, I mean, we see the sun turning dark. We see the moon turning red. We see the moon turning dark. We see mountains of something like a mountain coming out of the sky. We see something like a torch falling from heaven. Jesus said before he returns, all of the stars, the whole universe is going to go dark. I mean, to me, that is amazing, that the universe would go dark, because we live in the very nature of light. That's what stars do. They shine. So there's no doubt when Jesus says this, he's telling them that I think ultimately these things are going to be fulfilled within the framework of what we understand as Revelation 6 through 18. But it doesn't mean that we aren't going to see some of the precursors of these things, or the birth pangs of some of these things, or, what we might call, what Jesus called as birth pangs. So the great thing about astronomy is that we are starting to see things being discovered that are periodic, like comets, as an example, or asteroids. And to me, that's very, very fascinating, because of the proximity that many of them are predicted to come to the Earth.
So let's talk about some of these signs that we've heard about. I know you've observed some of them yourself, and let's just break this down a little bit. And one of the first things that I think about is in 2025, there was a lot of hype around this interstellar object that was coming between Mars and Earth and around, called 3i Atlas. And there was all kinds of people making all kinds of predictions about it. What was it? What was the hype around it? And whatever became of it?
Yeah, that's good, because it was. This is fascinating, because we've entered into a new era in the sense of the 3i. I just means interstellar. Atlas is the particular, basically, equipment that discovered it. This is very well known. So it's not. A lot of people think about Atlas referring to some of the Greek gods. That's really not why it was named that. That was basically the telescope that discovered it. And so Atlas is a survey telescope that is used. And so the 3 on it has to do with it. It's the third interstellar object that has been discovered. And so how do they know that? So this was only recent. This was just in July. And so they had been there with these surveys now. They just take these massive amounts of images, and then they put them into, they have people look at them, or now they're putting them into AI. And so AI is very, very good at looking at patterns. And so they just look and say, "Oh, look at this. Here's," and I do this with my telescope. When I want to set up a pointing model, I have a very sophisticated mount, and I go up and I'll put maybe 80 points or 100 points in, so that the telescope it'll zoom over there, and then it takes a picture of the sky, and then it records it. It zooms over there, takes a picture of that part of the sky, and so it'll go to all these different points. And then what it does is it plate solves it. It'll take a picture, and it says, oh, I know exactly where this is, and it has all the coordinates connected with all of it. And then it brings it into one specific model, and then it downloads that information to the mount. And then the mount, after that point, I tell it, go here to Jupiter, it zips over because it knows exactly where everything is perfectly. It goes over to Jupiter and it puts it right in the center. I mean, it is phenomenal. So what's happening is, because we have so much information, especially with the Gaia telescope. The Gaia was a telescope that was built by the Europeans, and it went and it mapped billions of stars in our galaxy and beyond. And so we understand the sky. So when you're looking at something, what happened is they took a picture, they go, oh, whoa, that moved from this image to this image. And so that's how they discovered that this was it was not a normal star. It was either an asteroid or a comet. So then what they did is, the reason it's interstellar is they were able, through the next few months, to tell that it didn't have a normal trajectory that a solar system comet would. And so then they realized, hey, this is coming at a very sharp angle to our solar system, the plane of the solar system. This is coming from interstellar. That's unusual. So the 3 just tells us it's only the third one ever discovered. Now, that doesn't mean that this is only the third one that has ever been here. It's just only the third one that we've ever discovered and recognized, because a new telescope, one of the ones that everybody's been waiting on, is the Vera C. Rubin telescope down in South America. It just came online over the last 6 months, and it is the largest telescope with the biggest camera. It's like a 3.2 gigapixel. It's terabytes and terabytes, petabytes of information that it's planned on doing. And what it's designed to do is to survey the sky. So I think this isn't a thus saith the Lord prediction. This is just a common sense prediction, that because it's able to survey the sky like every few days, the full sky, and then take that information, and then it's going to be analyzed. I think we are going to be discovering far more interstellar comets or asteroids, and asteroids, solar system comets. And so I think the attention that is going to happen over the next, from here on out, is going to be much greater, and the precision is going to be greater, because now all of a sudden they're going to be like, hey, there is something there that wasn't caught, because it's very difficult, most people. But now with this amount of information, we're going to see more and more of this, which again, I think is timely as we're approaching the end of the age. We're going to be able to have much more coordinates that I could look up with my telescope. We had one of our guys, which we put on Facebook. He took a series of pictures of 3i Atlas, and you could see it moving right in there. So this is exciting times for sure.
So whatever became of it?
So discovered on July 1st. It came closest to the Earth in December. And so there were a lot of pictures were taken in December. It first came in by Mars, and the Mars reconnaissance took some pictures of it. And then as it came around the sun. And then as it approached, it's interesting because it came around the sun in October. And then the idea was based on where the Earth was, it was making its way out. And so in December, it was the closest that it was here, and there were some images that were taken. Now it's on its way to Jupiter. It's heading out of the solar system. And so really in the spring, basically March or so, it is going to go by Jupiter, and then it's heading out. It's leaving. And so what has come of it? Well, it's not necessarily over yet, because there's still analysis, because it's moved out of the sun's basically view, which was blurring everything. There's Hubble and a whole bunch of other telescopes, including amateur astronomers, are taking pictures of it. But I'm glad you brought up the idea of what was made of it. The big deal, was it an alien mothership? And the one primarily responsible for even the topic is Avi Loeb, a Harvard astrophysicist, very brilliant guy. From Harvard. He manages what's known as the Galileo Project, and which is meant to, again, they have many telescopes, but one of them is to survey the sky looking for potential extraterrestrial idea or things. So he began to analyze some of what he called coincidentals or improbables, which led him to create what he created was the lobe scale. One being natural, just normal, 10 being it's an alien mothership. So that's kind of his. I think I appreciate his openness to challenge the consensus of the astrophysics community, because many times they're so narrow. But I think also he certainly, being director of the Galileo project, he has a little bit of a bias. But again, I appreciate that he's at least asking the conversation. So many of the things, the improbables that he brought up, led people, especially online, to go crazy, calling it a mothership, aliens, certain very odd, unusual quirks about this particular object. But at the end of the day, what basically, if you read the critiques of him, the astronomical community, there are relative answers to all of the things, the improbables that he brought up. And so as it's leaving, it's heading out like it was. It's coming in, it went around the sun, and it's leaving at a very high rate of speed, which is unusual for normal solar system comets, 140,000 miles an hour, which is pretty fast. So what has come of it? It's to me, Brad, it'll be interesting that 6 months from now, it'll be past Jupiter, it'll be heading out, and it'll take a little while to get out of our solar system. But there's no doubt that if you go on YouTube, I mean, the gates were open as it relates to sensationalism. It's certainly a mothership, people praying to it, new age stuff. So the key thing here for us as Christians is, do you remember, I believe it was in 1997, Comet Hale-Bopp. Remember the Comet Hale-Bopp? Beautiful. I remember, I know where I saw it. It was just beautiful, my binoculars and my telescope. Well, even back then, remember the people that killed themselves? They committed suicide because they thought it was a mothership and they were going to join it. And so this is the risk of deception in our world with the sensationalism that happens over something that is very natural.
And I think there's a theme in here that we're talking about today about hype versus hope. And hope grounds you. Hype will send you flying off the rails. And that really takes us back to our theme here about, there's a difference between hype versus hope. Our hope is in Jesus Christ, and that grounds us in who we are and where we're going and what we're doing, right?
100%. I mean, and this is where, I mean, you're an eschatology guy, as well as a pastor. So, as I am, so you have a broad, we have a broad, we're like general practitioners many times, in the sense of preaching, because yeah, we know what's in the book of Hebrews. We know what's in Colossians. We teach all of the Bible, but the hobby is eschatology, for me at least. And so, but what we realize is in Matthew 24:4, the first thing he tells the disciples, it's amazing. The first thing he says is, let no one deceive you.
Absolutely.
That the lead right out of the gate is the deception and the lack of discernment is going to be ubiquitous everywhere. And we need to avoid the sensationalism that is appearing not only with people, but with social media, you name it, all over the place. We need to stay grounded in the word. We need to stay grounded in caution. We watch, but we're cautious. We test all things, right? Scripture says that, test all things. So this is what I find is we're entering into this age, especially with the introduction of AI, which obviously you wrote a book on it. And so the ability for the images that we see to be changed or to be completely fabricated out of nowhere, what's real anymore? So important for us as Christians to be cautious with everything. People send me things all the time and I say, hey, did you vet that? Did you see who made it, who created it? And anymore, Brad, it's kind of sad that sometimes I've come to the point where I almost only trust the things that I've taken myself.
Absolutely. And we can also shift to the other side of the spectrum where people are just burying their heads in the sand,
Mm-hmm.
and we're not using any discernment that way either. So by looking at the heavens, we're reminded of where our hope is. And one of the things that we're seeing, and I've been reading about coming up, is there's going to be a supernova Some reports I've read says that we'll be able to see it in daytime.
And well, this is the so this is kind of the challenge. Is if I've seen articles too, and you see the headlines, but it's not necessarily going to be a supernova. It's just going to be a nova. And so there's a big difference, because a supernova, as you said, is something that is magnificent. It's the basic difference between a supernova and a nova is a nova, in Latin just means new, right? And so it's a new star. The reason they use that language is because a star brightens. So a nova, in this particular case, with this one, in the Sagittarius constellation, which is right near Cygnus, the Northern Cross. It's a very beautiful area. Primarily, you can see it mostly in the summer. But so what they see here is they have this white dwarf star. It's a binary star, which most actually star systems are. So it's this white dwarf star that is sucking its companion star all the mass over, and it's basically draining its companion star. But what it does, though, is by draining that, it'll brighten. And so as it brightens, sometimes it'll brighten, and then it goes back, and sometimes these things can go over decades. Well, with this particular white dwarf star, they're seeing it and they're watching it, but they think that the true nova event, where it'll potentially be able to be seen, maybe even in the day, with particular equipment, but certainly at night. The idea is they think it'll go as bright as Sirius, which is the brightest star in the sky, near the Orion constellation. But here again, where there's a lot of hype, because it's not going to be a supernova, it's just going to be a nova, because a supernova will destroy the star. This is simply just grabbing some from the neighbor. But they say, well, when is this going to happen? Well, it could happen in the next century. Like, wait a minute. So I read this article and I'm like, am I going to stay up tonight to see it? You're like, it's going to be potentially 50 to 60 years off. So this is where we have to be careful with clickbait and the language, because we click on, we're like, oh my gosh. And then how often have we read the title of the article, and we read it in the main body, and we're like, that said nothing about what the title said. So this is, again, another example of clickbait, sadly.
Well, with that, let's move to another star that's a little closer to us, our own sun. Can you explain a little bit more about the solar flares?
Yeah, this is phenomenal, because the sun has a normal 11-year cycle. We have solar filters and solar telescopes. We took some great images last year at the eclipse, which we can talk about as well. But so normal 11-year cycle. So it goes from a minimum up to a maximum, and then it comes back down to the minimum over 11 years, or you can start at the maximum, whatever. So within that 11-year cycle, you have the ups and downs. Well, the last minimum was around 2019. And so the high point then, it was between 2024 and 2025, which it's beautiful to look at through a telescope, because you can see the sunspot. Usually the minimum and the maximum you can determine it based on the amount of sunspots that are being recorded. And so in 2024, 25, that was the highest, and we're still making our way down. We're starting to decline. But what's crazy now, Brad, is that one of the most well-known was known as the Carrington event. 1859, it was this massive solar flare, which was the biggest solar flares you have. There's different levels, is an X. And one of the biggest is X10. Well, this was greater than an X10. And even at that time, it caused massive, what we call northern lights, not northern anymore, because they're normally only seen over the North Pole and down, maybe into Canada and around. But these came all the way down. And so it disrupted, back at that time, the technology, which was telegrams and other electrical things. Well, the difference being is that right now we're in an age of massive amounts of technology, satellites. And so if you were to have something like that today, it would take down the power grid itself because of the electrical storm that it would produce. And you would imagine it would fry a lot of the satellites. I mean, Starlink, Elon Musk, Starlink itself has almost 10,000 satellites. And then if you think about all the other weather satellites and military satellites, that's one of the risks. That's one of the challenges that is happening right now. And so what we're seeing is there's no doubt. I find it interesting too, so that if you look at the next cycle of high point is going to be right around 2034, 2035. So people can run with those dates if they want as it relates to all the other things. But nevertheless, what you see in the book of Revelation is the sun turning dark, or the sun, I would say the sun going bright, the sun turning nova, as I mentioned, that a star will go nova. We see in Revelation 16 that one of the bowl judgments is people getting burned because the radiance of the sun's heat and energy is expanding and turning brighter. And so people getting burned and having to get out, it's very astronomical. It's part of the natural world, but yet there's no doubt the book of Revelation is describing supernatural events where God basically kickstarts some of these natural events to happen.
Are we seeing the precursors to what could be what Revelation 16 talks about? What do you think?
The question is, and this is a theological question. So you're a pastor, okay? Is God doing something supernatural, or has he planned it from the beginning of time for these natural events to occur at the specific time that he wants? It's like Joshua 10 with the sun standing still, or it says there that basically meteorites were killing. It says more people were killed by meteorites than they were by the people of Joshua. So you have all these meteorites coming out of the sky. Well, God obviously put those in orbit in the specific trajectory to land at a very specific, and it hit a person. Okay. So the question then is, nevertheless, what we see in the book of Revelation is Jesus, the one that is opening the seal. The time is now, when he does that. So there's no doubt that as it relates currently, I think astronomers are looking at the solar cycles beginning to decline, even though we had a solar flare just a couple weeks ago that provided some, northern lights. It was a pretty big solar flare. So I think they're watching and going, well, we're heading down now. So I think for them, they're going to be glad, because if you go 3 years from now at the solar minimum, let's say, or 4 years, Musk is probably going to have 30,000 satellites up. So what does that look like for the next solar maximum, again, around that 2034 timeframe? Pretty crazy.
I'm glad we have people like you that understand this a little more to help bring some good clarity to it. So thank you. On the other sky object that we often talk about is the moon. And you mentioned earlier, there's a lot of hype about blood moons and eclipses and so on. What's going on this year with the moon?
Yeah, so there are always lunar eclipses. They're pretty consistent, and they're more regular than what people might think. And so you have lunar eclipses happening, and you're like, okay, you have another solar eclipse, not necessarily over America, but you can go fly to these. I think the next one is going to be in Egypt. I might be wrong on that, but I remember seeing an ad is like, hey, I wouldn't mind going to Egypt because it's going to be like 6 or 7 minutes. So you have, the Bible talks about the moon turning red, blood red, which again, most of the time, depending on the time of the year or the time of day, even that you see the lunar eclipse, you'll see where the light, basically the moon, the earth is between the sun and the moon, and the light from the sun is going around the edges of the earth through the atmosphere, and then the light is basically being shifted to the red, which is why the moon turns red. It's very predictable. Sometimes some are more red than others. If there's been a volcano, or there's been certain maybe pollution or dust storms, you'll see it basically magnified. But there's other times when it says the sun will not give its light, and the moon will not give its light. And so this isn't just a normal lunar eclipse. This is because if the sun goes dark, there is no light from the moon. It's just dark. So, and the stars going dark. So to me, there's a whole bunch of things happening in the book of Revelation, which are beyond the normal cycles. These aren't just a normal lunar eclipse. And so when you talk about blood moons, there's been in history, the reason why that became very important. I remember around 2008, I was looking at the blood moon phenomenon, and I did not write a book on it, which mainly because I researched it, and I'm like, well, this doesn't really play out because what I was looking for was blood moons that happened on Jewish feasts. Because, for example, Passover is always a full moon, which a full moon is when you have a lunar eclipse. And so I began to look at all these in history, and it was very cool to do this, But if you looked at, like, for example, a tetrad, that's usually the tetrad is 4. So you see where, for example, there was a tetrad of blood moons, solar eclipses that happened on Jewish feasts back in 1493 and 1494. And so I thought, well, that's interesting. But it happened after 1492 when all the Jews were expelled from Spain and Columbus discovered the New World. So I thought, well, that happened afterwards. So it wasn't a predictor. Well, then the next one happened in 1949 and 1950, which we know was when? It wasn't 1947 predicting the establishment of the state of Israel. It was after. And so I was like, well, it wasn't a predictor of anything. And so I thought, well, that doesn't really help. And then the next one was in 1967 and 68, which again was just right after the 6-Day War. And so I thought, well, again, it was not a predictor. It would have been really neat. I'll tell you what, Brad, if at this time, I don't remember anybody else looking at it. If it would have happened before, I would have wrote a book on it. But I didn't. Exactly, because I thought, wow. And so I remember looking at it and I thought, well, the next one's going to happen in basically 2014 and 15. But since it didn't happen before those events, I just was like, well, it's not a predictor event. And so sure enough, but others have written about this, 2012, 2013, John Hagee and others. And they obviously sold a lot of books. And but what happened in 2014 and 15? Nothing.
The Jewish calendar is a moon cycle calendar. So there's going to be a lot of connections there too, right? What John was seeing were things that were happening outside of the norm, above the norm of what we normally see. How do people who are watching, how do they sift between the hype and the truth?
I appreciate that because last year, as we know, I remember watching the solar eclipse that came across America in 2017, August of 2017. I was living in the Northwest, Pacific Northwest, and it came right through there. And then, of course, we had the eclipse of 2024. And so now the hype that was going on, it created the shadow or the eclipse mark line, created an X over the United States, and X marks the spot. The United States is going down. It's a judgment. And I remember writing at the time that prior to this is do not fall into the hype. I mean, there were people that were just, you can't, this is beyond coincidence. That's their favorite phrase. You can't make this up. This is beyond coincidence. And yet it came and it went, and what happened? Nothing. And yet millions upon millions of views and hits and YouTube and everything else and clickbait. And so here again, afterwards, the mocking of the prophecy people was just vicious. And you know what? The people that were making the predictions, they earned that. They earned the viciousness. Now, and so it hurt the cause of Christ because when you look in the Bible, and I wrote an article, people can find it on our website, prophecywatchers.com, where I simply just asked the question, what in the Bible ever do you see where a normal eclipse is used as an omen? And it's not. The word itself, nowhere in the Bible does it show the normal pattern of astronomical events. Beautiful. An eclipse is beautiful, whether it's a lunar eclipse or a solar eclipse. Now, what the Bible does say in Jeremiah 10, verse 2, is Jeremiah says the pagan religions, they use these eclipses and these astronomical events as omens to control you. And he says, don't be like the pagan nations. So anybody that says that God uses these normal natural events as a sign of omens or destructions is simply being unbiblical. God doesn't do that. Nowhere. That's why it's important to say in the book of Revelation, these are not natural normal events. It's not normal for the moon to be blood red when the sun is dark. The sun is as black as sackcloth. Those are all out of the normal events. And that's why they're relatively supernatural. When the sun is burning or the sun is going dark, God pours out darkness on the beast of the kingdom, or the kingdom of the beast. Those aren't normal. That's very, very unusual. And so this is why it's important, where I think for us to be discerning, not get sucked into the hype. Again, the holy eclipse hysteria of 2017 to 2024, what it came and went. And you ask, what was it?
And I think there was one in 2020, right? Right in the middle of COVID, and everybody was losing their mind over that one too. Yep. But you know what it reminds me, Mondo, is when I look at stuff like that, how perfectly God put the universe together. Mm-hmm. You know, the sun rises every day, and the sun sets every day, and the moon is there. It has its cycles. God put everything in perfect sequence. But there was such precision made with such intelligence that we look at that, and as Psalm 19 says, the heavens declare the glory of the Lord. And I don't know if the psalmist really understood the significance of what he was writing when he wrote that. And as we have come to understand the natural world even more, let's land this on some hope for people that have been buying into this hype before, and they feel like they've been let down. The YouTube prophets have tried to sell all this to get clicks and stuff. What do you say to somebody that's like, man, Mondo, I keep hearing all this stuff and I keep getting excited, and every time I hear this, nothing comes together. Nothing happens, and I just don't know what to do anymore. Where's the hope?
Yeah, I think that this is where the Lord would tell us, don't be deceived. That deception is going to get worse and worse, and just the amount of different viewpoints out there, and the amount of just bombardment that we see in social media. And again, we're in the age of AI. So what is there? I think the hope comes back to, number one, we know that there are going to be supernatural cosmic events. Clearly, you read the book of Revelation. They're Apophis, the people talk of Apophis as an example, and just, it's coming back in 2029. And, there's been a lot of writings about it. And I would just say, stay cautious. Don't get sucked in any predictions about any of these things. Apophis is coming. It's April 13th of 2029, and then 2036, it's coming back. So amongst many others. But I think for us, we stay rooted in the scripture. We stay rooted in the reality of the events. We don't deny the reality of these cosmic events, but I think that the challenge that we have is not necessarily to assign any specific meaning or predictive meaning to any of these, except in general. So the hope is found in the truth of Scripture. It's found in our relationship with the Lord. I mean, the key thing is Jesus said, seek first the kingdom and in God's righteousness, and God will take care of the rest. And so I think if we keep the gospel first, we continue to grow in that. We continue to share the gospel with those around us. But also, I enjoy learning as much as I can, and to try to be as well equipped as I can about as many topics that interest me. Why? Because when I talk about them, I can then use those to bring it back to the gospel. Because you could talk about, I love archaeology, so you could talk about people in the archaeological world that maybe aren't saved, or in the astronomical world. And there's no doubt there's people that love astrophotography. So I go in there and I could talk to them about it, and we could talk about all the technology and everything. It's amazing. But then you can point them, who created that, right? God's a creator, and look at our project of what we're doing. But the hope, as we know, is ultimately found in the one who created all, and that he has a purpose, he has a plan. As you mentioned, the precision of all these orbital mechanics and laws are phenomenal for what he has done. And this brings us comfort, because over and over God tells us to look at the heavens, look at the seasons, and to say, I made those. Nothing's out of my control. Nothing's outside of my sovereignty, and that gives me comfort and hope.
If you're finding yourself just chasing, so many different things, you hear people on YouTube, or you hear people here or there talking, and you just don't know what to believe, you reach out to somebody you can trust. Reach out to prophecy watchers and ask, hey, I heard this on YouTube. What do you guys think? Or you can reach out to me or your pastor. But this book is what we hold on to. It's where we stand. It's where we sit. It's where we rest. When we start adding stuff to that or exploring outside of that, is where we find ourselves in a lot of we get ourselves in a lot of problems. But at the same time, we're not going to hide our heads in the sand either and just kind of pretend like nothing's happening. Mondo, it's been a great conversation today. Again, I could talk to you for hours. Before we close, where can people find you? How can people get a hold of you? And what's coming up next for Prophecy Watchers?
I appreciate it, Brad. It's been great being here. And prophecywatchers.com. If you go there, you can just see access to all the different places we are. Again, Prophecy Watchers has a pretty big footprint: television, radio, social media, you name it. And the next thing up for us is we have an Israel trip planned in May, and that'll be good, as well as our upcoming conference in June 4th through 7th. The theme is the rapture in the Rockies. We're hoping that we're raptured while we're in the Rockies come June. And not a prediction, but a hope. And so people can check that out. Of course, they can show up, which will be great. It's going to be a nice time, certainly in Colorado. But there will be a live stream option as well. But here we are, 2026. Brad, as you know, things are heating up. We got something called the Board of Peace now. We got a potential war with Iran. I mean, here we are. We get front row seats to be able to share of all that God is doing, and He's bringing it to a point. The point of the return of Jesus, which is what we want.
Mondo, thanks again for being on with me today, and I hope I can join you guys in the studio again sometime. Until then, I will see you in Colorado, by the way. So until
Awesome.
then, hang in there and enjoy this brisk winter events we're having, and we'll see you guys again soon. Tell everybody at Prophecy Watchers we said hi.
Will do.
God
Amen.
bless.